Okay, so today we're going to have a bit of fun in the Cessna 152. We are going to fly in very low visibility conditions across the map. Obviously the 152, the main reason for using it is it has no GPS. Okay, so and we have to fly it by hand. And we're going to fly in extremely low visibility conditions from A to B across a map using the VOR radios to navigate, using the from and to the various stations. Okay, so let's go and have a look at LittleNavMap and see what we're doing. We're taking off from Santa Maria over here, Kilo Sierra Mike X-ray. And we're going to fly down towards the coast and land at Santa Barbara Municipal, Kilo Sierra Bravo Alpha. And we're going to do so by flying a route from a VOR and to a VOR and from a VOR on a radial to a distance from that VOR, and then we will pick up the ILS and land at Santa Barbara. And we're going to do all of this in horrific weather. So you can see it's raining. Actually, the raining isn't as bad as it was a couple of minutes ago. So the wind is blowing that way and the rain's gone that way a fair amount. But we're going to be doing this almost as an academic exercise to see how you fly following a radio. Okay, so first things first, let's get this aeroplane started up. Okay, mixture in, fuel is on, and then turn the key. So we're just opening the throttle to see the oil pressure rises, and it does. You can see the needle coming up into the green, and then we'll drop the revs. So you can see the RPM is over here. It will tick over, around about 800 RPM, which is fine. Okay, we are going to go and move the flaps for takeoff. I've removed the yoke by clicking on the stalk of the yoke just so we can see what we're doing. We're going to be watching the instruments a lot during this flight. So the first thing we need to do, if we think about it, we're going to look on the airfield. We're going to do a left turn and then follow taxiway Delta down, and we'll cross in early. We won't need the whole runway. So we'll follow taxiway Delta down and take off on runway 12. Yeah, there's only a 5 knot tailwind. It shouldn't affect us. And then we are going to take 125 degrees as our heading. Okay, before we take off though, we are going to tune in this VOR station, and we want a from radial of 125 degrees from 111. Okay, so let's do that now. So you can see comm radio here and nav radio. This nav radio relates to this instrument here, and the second nav radio relates to this instrument. So if we just go and remind ourselves, we want 111. So you can see our aircraft on the map there. We are going to only play fair here. We're going to turn the indicators off on LittleNavMap so we can't see anything anymore. We don't know where we are. Okay, so we can't cheat. We do know we need to climb to 4,000 feet to avoid some hills along the way, otherwise I'll come looming out of the mist and slam straight into them. Okay, 111 on nav 1. So here's nav 1. We want 111. And then we transfer, so we've tuned that into the standby frequency. This is the active frequency that this instrument's actually showing. We click the button underneath and it swaps them. And then this is now showing the active frequency. So it was 111.00. So it's not showing anything at the moment, but it will do when we take off. And we want to be flying 125 degrees from it. Yeah? So we tune the omni-bearing selector. We spin it round to 125 degrees. So 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100, 110, 120, 125-ish, about there. Okay, so let's go and take off and see what happens to those various needles. So just if you've not flown a Cessna 152 or you're just starting out with Flight Sim, you've got airspeed over here. This is indicated airspeed. So it's measured by this pitot tube over on the wing that measures the air pressure hitting it. You've got the attitude indicator, which is the artificial horizon. So if you can't see the horizon at any time for in cloud, we can still see this. Clock, we've got altimeter, which measures height above the ground. If we press B, it will calibrate itself to the local atmospheric pressure, which otherwise you would do with this little knob at the bottom, which changes, you can see either millibars or hectopascals over there. So in America you tend to use inches. In Europe they tend to use hectopascals. You've got the nav radio I just spoke about. We'll see what the needles do when we're flying. We've got turn coordinator. We won't really be paying much attention to that today. We've got the compass. We've got vertical speed. And we've got obviously the second nav instrument and some engine gauges. Over the other side of the cockpit we have got ADF, which we're not going to be using. And we've got the RPM, obviously, of the engine, revs per minute. Okay. Have we got lights on? We have lights on, so we've got the nav lights, strobe lights, and the beacon lights are already on. We can turn on the pitot heat in case we go into cloud that is cold. That might freeze up the pitot tube, and therefore we would have no accurate reading of speed anymore. Okay, I'm going to move my mug of coffee out of the way and grab my joystick and put it in front of me so I can see what I'm doing. We are going to come off the parking brake. So you can see there was a plunger over here on this aircraft. If you pull it out, that is the parking brake. If you push it in, it releases the parking brake. So you notice the pedals tipped. So the rudder pedals, if you tip them forwards, that is the brakes on the rear wheels of the aircraft. Okay, let's get going. So if you remember where we were parked, we just need to double back on ourselves and go towards the runway. So we're coming back towards the taxiway alongside the runway at the moment. We can probably shortcut this, can't we? We don't need much takeoff roll at all in a Cessna. So we're going to cut straight out to the runway. So this is the runway we are approaching now. So full throttle. Holding a small amount of left rudder to counteract the torque of the engine and the wind. Coming up for 60 knots, and I'm going to rotate gently, and we're in the air. Flaps up. And you will notice straight away that the instrument has come on. So if I just hold the joystick steady, I'm just going to trim the aircraft so it will climb out gently on its own without me having to do much to it. So you can see we are climbing at around 1,000 feet a minute, which is fine. And if we go and look on the map, we want to be flying that line from 125 degrees. So if we put that line out here, you can see if where we took off there, the line's going to be to our right. So if we go and look over here, this instrument is saying the line is to our right. So if we fly 150 degrees for a short time and level up, we're not going to really need to look outside much during this flight, but we do need to keep climbing. So we're at 160 degrees. You will see the needle going closer. So what's happening is we are getting closer and closer to the line. Now the one downer about this aircraft is it doesn't have distance measuring equipment. So we can't see how far away we are from the VOR station, but you can see now we are getting closer and closer to that line that we were talking about. We're also coming up through 1500 feet, so we're still climbing 500 feet a minute, which is fine. We're almost on the line now. So if we turn back now towards 125 degrees, we will stay on the line. So I'm just watching the compass and banking slightly left. So we've levelled up the artificial horizon. It's easy to know if you are level. There's a white line and there's a gap at the top. And if you can see the white line through the gap, you're level. So, you know, regardless of judging the lines here, you can see the white marker at the top, whether it's showing through the top or not. Okay, so we're still at about 125 degrees. So let's just have a look at the map. So what we've effectively done is taken off, then steered left and then right to join this line. So while we're flying along, we will tune the second VOR to 113.80. So we'll keep an eye. Oh, look, the aeroplane has started turning. That's the wind hitting it. So 113.80 on VOR number 2. So we're going to tune this one in and see if it comes alive. So 113.80, make that the active frequency and see if this comes alive, and it has done. So we can start navigating towards our destination already. Yeah, so we'll get the yoke out of the way and we'll start turning this round to find out what direction we need to go directly to that VOR. There we go. So I've turned the omni-bearing selector round. I'm just levelling the plane up, trying to do 3 things at once here. We're still climbing. We're at 3,000 feet, so we're almost at the height we need to be at for later in the route. So this tells us 125 degrees to go straight to the VOR we wanted to go to. So let's go and have a look at our map again. Notice we can't see ourselves on the map. So there's the VOR that we're heading for. So we're somewhere along this line at 125 degrees that will lead straight to that VOR. Yeah? When we get there, we'll pass over it and we'll carry on, and then we'll retune nav1 to 110.30. So we just carry on now blindly, basically. Whoa, we've started turning, look. And notice the needle has moved. So while I wasn't looking, the wind hit the plane, started rotating it. So I'm going to turn the compass back across our route. So we were supposed to be going 125. Let's go for 140, level up. And this needle should come all the way back in. So we're basically intercepting the 125 degree line, if you imagine in your head. So if you imagine what we did there, we went off to one side and we're now coming back. Yeah, the wind is trying to rotate the plane all the time. So I'm going to turn a little bit more to say 160 or 150 degrees. So you can see I'm just banking slightly, 150 degrees. So we're basically coming downwards towards the line in towards the airfield. In fact, we could illustrate this. If I make LittleNavMap not full size, then I can concentrate on both at once. Well, hopefully that's the aim. So if I switch that part off and that part off, that's all we really need to see, isn't it? Except I'm rubbish with the mouse and I can't grab the corner of the window. There we go. So I can now concentrate on both and talk to you at the same time. We really need that. In between both though. There we go. So we are flying 155 degrees, so we're coming downwards towards the line where we veered off to the left. So we're almost back on the line. When we're on the line, we will turn left. We can start turning left now. Back towards 125. So we're coming down somewhere over here and we're going to turn back towards the line. So we're at 4,500 feet now, so we can level out. So I'm just going to move this out of the way for the moment. We just need to concentrate on flying towards this one. So this is the from that we left from. This is the to. So this is the one we're flying towards. So we want to be flying. We've gone slightly to the right now. So back to 110 degrees. I'm just trimming the aeroplane so we're not going to continue climbing any further. We're nearly up to 5,000 feet. The only reason I'm worried about the height is if you look at the height plot of the ground underneath at this line, it actually comes up to 2,500 feet. So I'm just giving ourselves plenty of leeway along the route. So we can just start descending. We can see some ground down there, but not very much, and we're going to, only because we're in a gap in the cloud. We're about to go back into the cloud again. So again, look, we've gone to the left of the line, so all we do is turn to more than the angle, so we're going 150 for example, or 140, and we'll go back towards the line. So flying along 140 degrees, so we're actually going that way. So we'll cross over the line. If you imagine we have an aeroplane in the middle of this going that way, the line is to our right at the moment, and we're going that way. So we're going towards the line. We can start descending a little bit. We don't need to be this high. So we're coming down 1,000 feet a minute, and we're getting closer and closer to the 125 degree line. So in a way, I'm not holding it as tightly as I should to the angle, but it gives you some idea of what you do to chase. You're chasing the line essentially. So you know, if you're to one side of it, you just turn a few degrees the other side of it. So then we turn back to 125. So we're almost on the line. Look. This is the line to the second VOR station, if you remember. When this flicks over from to from, it means we've gone over the top of it. So there we go, we're at 125 degrees now. I'm just trimming the plane out a little bit more. Okay, so 4,000 feet is where we want to be at, which we are now. Perfect. So a bit more, so I'm just tweaking the trim on the elevators to try and control the vertical speed. I'm giving us kind of 1,500 feet over the top of the hills that we think are there. Notice we're drifting because of the wind. Even though we're travelling 125 degrees, we're not seeing what we expect to see, so we fly. We turn to 140 and we chase the line back. And the line will gently come back in. Obviously, if we turn a lot, you'll see the line sweep back into the middle quite quickly. So I'm going to go to 160 degrees, for example. So we're actually heading that direction across the line. Oh, we're down to 3,500 feet. I need to be careful. See, this is the multitasking part about flying the light aeroplane in dangerous conditions. So you can see we've gone past the line now because we took a steep line to it. So let's go and turn back to 125. So we're watching the compass. And we know from past experience, if we just sent it up on 125, we'll get blown back towards the line because the wind is across us. That's why the plane keeps getting tipped around whenever we go and look at other screens. So we know when, at the moment, an angle of 125 degrees, or a heading of 125 degrees, we are heading to the VOR. That's what this little indicator means. When this flips over, it will go dead for a moment, and then that will flip to from. When that happens, we will tune nav1 to the ILS frequency. If we have a little look at the map, we could have a figure out to see where we are by looking at another VOR station. There's one over here, 117.50. So we could have a bit of fun with that. If the plane's going to stay nice and steady for us, let's go and tune VOR number 1, 117.50. Because then we could take a bearing from it and draw it on the map and figure out where we are. We want the from reading. So we're just letting our aeroplane fly along. Right, there we go. We are at 180, 190 degrees from it. So if we go to this VOR and measure the distance and go to 190, we are somewhere here. So we are getting close to this VOR station. So let's concentrate on this one still. We're still flying about, we're flying at 150 degrees now. Look, we've been slowly rotating while we were talking. So let's get this turned back to 125. So we're pretty much on the line, which is great. We're nearly just about 4,000 feet, which is also great. It still says we're going to the beacon at 111. Yeah, so this is the beacon. Sorry, at 113.8. This is the beacon at 113.8. And we are still flying to it. And you can see the needle is starting to move quite quickly. In other words, we're almost on top of it. Which we kind of expected from taking that other reading of the other VOR station. So we're going to get ready to tune VOR, or nav1, sorry, to the ILS frequency of 110.30. We can use this now, and we just keep flying 125, but from. So the ILS was 110.30. So 110.30, and we select it, and it's woken up. Now, notice OBS will have no bearing on this now. This is purely set to the runway direction. The OBS knob won't do anything because it's a ILS. So we can actually go, just for reference, we can put the runway direction in, which will be 75 degrees. So we need to spin this almost all the way around. So there's 75 degrees on the Omni bearing selector. Just to give us some reference, even though it doesn't have any bearing on this, it's nice to have as a reference so we know the runway direction is 75. So what's happening now is if we keep flying this 125 degree course, we will eventually fly onto the glide slope for the runway. You can see we're almost on the vertical part of the glide slope, so we're almost at the right place to start descending already, but we're not in line with the runway yet. When this slides across, we'll be in line with the runway and we will turn to 75 degrees. So relative to us, the runway is this direction, but it's actually over here. Yeah, we haven't got in line with it yet. Notice the nav has turned to from now. So nav 2 was pointing at 110.5, which we flew over the top of. So that's saying from. This is still saying to. So we just stick to our guns and keep flying 125 degrees. Or thereabouts. 130, 125, it doesn't really matter. Now here's the hills that I was worried about. Yep, this is why we were careful about making sure we followed our route. Yeah, if we had been massively out, we would have crashed straight into that hillside. Now we are actually higher than we need to be. So we're going to start looking outside now. And we can start descending, chasing this line in nav 1. So we're going to come off the throttle a bit now. And start trimming the elevator down to make us descend at a nice rate, not too steeply. So we are now, even though we're not in line with the runway yet, we're at the right height at this distance to follow a 3-degree line basically down to the ground. But we keep following kind of 125, 130 degrees-ish until the line comes across. We're getting too low. So we're going to pull up to stop that happening. So just to illustrate what we're doing here, I'm just going to get the elevator sorted out so I don't have to panic. We are now somewhere here flying towards the glide slope. So we're in the right place in the sky upwards, but we're not in the right place laterally over the ILS beam. When we are in the right place laterally, this line will sweep in, and we know we have to turn to 75 degrees. So we're still heading on 120 odd degrees. Obviously, if I wasn't talking to you, I would be focusing a lot more on flying and just following the various needles, and we would have no panics. We have a momentary break in the cloud, which is very, very welcome. But we're not going to cheat and look at it, because I want to prove the instruments. So let's zoom in right on them. We're a little bit high, so we can nose down gently, and you can see the needle is coming towards us. So we're almost on the line down to the runway from an attitude perspective. We're just continuing on with heading across the angle. The runway is going to be this angle, so it's over here somewhere, and we're flying towards it, and we'll turn left onto it. We're not a million miles away now, because look at the altitude. We're at 1,200 feet. Here it comes. So we start turning left. Yeah, the needle's coming. We know it's 75 degrees. So we're on 75 degrees, we're on the needle, we just need to navigate up and down now. So let's go and look up, and there's the runway. Now we can obviously go through the various landing checks. Obviously, if you've got distance measuring equipment, you've got a much easier game because you know how far away you are as well. We didn't have that, so we had the more difficult version of this to do. So we're getting the speed down now to, you can see, if we get down to about 90 knots, we can put the flaps down. So we're back to almost idle. It's quite turbulent, isn't it? You don't notice it when you're just staring at the instruments. Okay, so flaps. So this is Santa Barbara that we're approaching. And again, even if we had no visibility, we just carry on following this until we get to a decision height on altitude. Yeah? So you would look at a chart typically which would tell you height above. Well, you have to make your decision usually at a couple of 100 feet. It varies from airfield to airfield, and if you still can't see the ground, a couple of 100 feet above the ground, then you have to make a decision to either go or not go. And that ties into when we calibrated the altimeter. So on the way towards the airfield, you calibrate the altimeter so it's accurate to what air traffic control might tell you. Or it may not be a controlled airfield, in which case it probably wouldn't have ILS either. So that becomes even more important. You might have a VOR station nearby, in which case it's much more ready reckoning. Okay, so let's press F to center our view up. Move the mouse out of the way. And just put the plane down. Okay. So we can sit up in the cockpit in the Cessna, which is quite handy when you're on the ground. And we have somebody meeting us at the runway, which is quite nice. But we're going to turn left off the runway. You can see there was a very slight tailwind from the windsock, but nothing worth worrying about. So let's go and park up on the general aviation parking over here. So hopefully that was kind of instructive as a good example. It's a 152. Obviously if I hadn't been talking to you I could have concentrated far more and we wouldn't have woven around so much. But in a way that's instructive in itself, because then you get to see the needles move, and you saw turbulence throwing the aeroplane around, so as soon as we weren't watching it, the aeroplane was moving. Obviously this plane hasn't got an autopilot, but the main reason for using the Cessna 152 is because it hasn't got GPS either, and I didn't want to be able to cheat by looking at GPS. Okay, let's just spin this round. Okay, parking brake on. Fuel to... we just cut the fuel off. That should stop the engine, and that cutting the fuel off obviously means the engine uses up any spare fuel that's left. And then you can turn the master valve off for the fuel, turn the ignition off, and go turn all the lights off that we had on. Turn the pitot heat off, turn the master off for the avionics, and we're done. Plane is cold and dark again. So there you go, that was the Cessna 152 doing a radio navigation example. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and go try it yourself. That's quite a nice place to do the flight actually. If we go and have a look at that flight plan again, so that was taking off from, if we go and look at the flight plan, there we go, Santa Maria, KSMX, flying into Santa Barbara, KSBA. And I just used the preset rainy day weather in Flight Simulator to do it. Yeah. So obviously we were lucky we had a break in the cloud right over this airfield, but that may not have happened another time, so good luck. Okay, I'll see you again soon.